Some years ago, my son came home asking me to go somewhere to meet someone. It was a young woman he had met. But that's not the way we function, you know. At least, these things were getting to know people, marrying them. It was done slightly differently. So instead of going to meet this young woman, we decided to go and meet the parents. Stay there for dinner, chit-chat with them. Because eventually kids turn out to be like their parents. So, I say this for the following reason. For those of you who want to some extent, understand why you have certain emotions, why you have certain desires, why society is the way it is, you must always examine the parents' history, culture. And without understanding the culture, there's a good chance that you'll fall into error, make lots of mistakes, and be punished because of them. The way we look at religion today, the way we look at human relationships, the way we look at basically everything today has taken about 600-700 years. The Western philosophy has been kind of under attack. Western psyche, people have been under attack. The culture has been under attack for almost 700 years. And to some extent, if you want to understand how your future is going to unfold, it's not a bad thing to kind of understand where all of us have come from, what influences or forces have been out there playing with us. It's also good for me in the sense that I don't take myself or you guys or the grades or the classes very seriously. Because understanding anything that's worth understanding takes a lot of effort that none of us in this class really have the stamina. And I don't mean to be depressing or dark or bleak, or maybe I am. About 300 years or so after Jesus died, there was a Roman emperor by the name of Constantine, and he did something really amazing. First, he had a dream, and in the dream, he saw the sun, and he saw a cross in the middle of the sun. And he wakes up from the dream saying, we need to become Christians. And of course, also for political reasons, because Christianity was gaining some power, paganism was losing power. And all of a sudden, the Western world becomes slowly a Christian world. And it's a beautiful thing. It's what we call the Dark Ages for the next 1,000 years. If you want to know who you are, it's easy. You don't need therapy. Just read the Bible. You used to have wings in the Garden of Eden. Very much like what Plato, the Greek philosopher, would say. You would always walk in the Garden of Eden, be in the sun, know the truth. You could do anything. No reprimands, no punishment. You'd be one with God, period. But something happened, and it wasn't really your fault. It was the fault of Adam and Eve. Your wings were clipped, you were sent down here. Easy philosophy of life. And your job down here is not to pursue happiness because it can't be found. You don't marry for happiness. You don't get a job for happiness. You don't have sex before marriage. You want to know your gender? Just take off your clothes. And what the mirror reflects back, that's who you are. There is no diversity. You are a sinner, period. And no one looks at life as this experience where you're able to find a place where you can be happy and prosperous. It doesn't work that way. Veil of tears. You work down here and you gain nothing but misery. And if you want to know where your happiness lies, it's when you die. And hopefully you've done some good work down here and you've had your faith. And when you stand before God, He says, well, I like you. Paradise is going to be where you're going to be. Very simple. There's a good element of shame, guilt. Communities are small. You don't challenge Christianity. You don't challenge the Bible. You don't put your parents in a nursing home. I does not exist. You live in the eyes of other people. People make you, people break you. It's not like today, where you got to figure out who you are, what you want to do, where you want to go. And it's going to take you a few lifetimes to figure all those things out. The Dark Ages, for example, everything was simple. It had its own problems. But you wouldn't suffer the sort of miseries that people today suffer from, loneliness and depression and various kinds of mental illnesses. But sometimes certain events happen in life, that destroys everything you believe in. Imagine you've been married for about 5, 10, 15, 20 years and you come to realize that the companion is in love with someone else and in fact has been in love with that person for a long, long time, way before you, and you just found out. Your definition of marriage changes, your definition of sex changes, love changes, who you are changes, everything changes. And once you understand, once you realize, you walk into your life with a good amount of doubt and skepticism, anger, hatred. Most of us in this class suffer from various cracks in life. You wake up, you have a flu, you're in a bad mood, and 2, 3 hours later it's finished. But you're having your breakfast and phone rings and it's your mom. Dad died. The following month, the phone rings again. It's your sister. Mom died. 2 weeks later, your dog dies. In the next few months, just people or things die left and right. And these are huge events that happen in your life. And your psyche, your mind tries to figure things out. Why is this happening? But you can't figure things out. If you had any faith, it goes away. How are you? What's your name?
William.
Just want to make sure I don't drop you. And the nice thing about the 1,000 years of Dark Ages is that when you walk around town, you don't find Buddhists, you don't find Hindus, you don't find Muslims, you don't find atheists. They're just Christians, period. Everybody thinks the same. But then there is this event. It's generally called the Black Plague or the bubonic plague. About half the population of Europe just dies. And people want answers, but there are no answers to be had. For those of you in this class who have read this particular book in the Old Testament called the Book of Job, it's a really, really, really good book. It's a miserable book, but it's a good book. It's a man who has faith, events happen in his life, and he loses his faith. He wants to die. He wants answers. But there are no answers for him. For the first time, he comes to realize that life is just unfair and God is unjust. How could all of a sudden 70 million people just die? The monks who live in a monastery, they all die. But the prostitutes in the brothels, they're all alive and prospering. So that's the first attack on Christianity, or I should say the human psyche. Your faith has suffered some cracks in it. You try to look for answers, but no answers. So you just sit there. So for those of you in this class who don't believe in God or religion, or you're skeptical about those things, this has nothing to do with you. You are an outcome of circumstances. A few years later, something even more devastating happens. Scientists are interesting people. They have faith, but they have faith in human reason. They have faith in facts. It doesn't mean that they don't believe in God or religion, but they're also devoted to their own intellect, rationality. And one of those folks happens to be Galileo. When you read Genesis, you find something very interesting. God creates everything. When it comes to us human beings, He breathes His own spirit into us. And then He says, I create all the things that human beings see for one simple reason, so that human beings can have dominion over all of them. Everything is created for us. We are at the very center of the universe. God doesn't do that for the sheep or the lions or the rats, only for us. When you go out on a date and you like someone, for the first few days or weeks, their eyes are lasered at you. They just look at you. Nothing else, no one else. They're focused. And you feel good that despite all the competitions out there, this person is only interested in you. A couple weeks pass by, and as you're sitting and having coffee, you realize their eyes are wandering here and there. You're less interesting. You're less relevant. And you try to come up with these elaborate stories to force interest, to force relevance. Galileo comes forth with this devastating news that the earth really is not the very center of the universe. We are a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere. There was a guy, early 20th century, Algerian philosopher named Albert Camus. He's also the product of 600-700 years of the Western culture being attacked by various events. He had argued that life is absurd. It is ridiculous. It doesn't care for any of us. You may want justice, you won't have it. You may want fairness, won't have it either. You may want to figure things out, you won't be able to. I don't live very far from Angela Davis, one of the founders of Black Panthers. And sometimes when I see her walk with her dog and her companion, I've never dared to ask her this question, but when I see her, the question kind of just comes up in my own head. When she looks at the culture today, and when she looks at all of her sacrifices, does she ever come to conclude that it's been a waste? A woman who lost her job, UCLA, a woman who suffered imprisonment. For what? For Snoop Dogg to come forth, to be the hero. For someone like Justin Timberlake. You do all that stuff, and this is what you get. So if the world is in the middle of nowhere, who guides us? Where is God's hand in the middle of all of this? Is our life without any purpose, without any meaning? Remember, for 1,000 years we believed that God lives inside us, the kingdom of God, the image of God. That He sits above, looks down. And everything happens for a reason. You get married for a reason. Your companion dies for a reason. You get cancer for a reason. But if we are a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere, things just happen randomly. Your parents don't divorce because of a certain reason. They just suck as human beings. You don't get sick because God wants you to learn something from it. That's just the way things are. It's unfair. You know, human beings are in a very funny position in life. T.S. Eliot once remarked that an orange is not burdened to sit somewhere and ask, why can't I be an apple? A cat doesn't sit somewhere and says, why can't I be a dog? Almost everything under the sun, except who and what they are. Human beings? No. You're looking for meaning and purpose, identity, relevance, significance. We create all these elaborate meanings to things. The burden that Galileo imposes upon us is the following. And suppose all these different events. From the moment you are born to the time you die, you have to figure out who you are, what you are, You have to figure out your companion, who and what he or she is. You have to figure out your life, what you want to do with it. You got to figure out what to do with society. And if you have kids, you got to figure out what to do with the kids in a society. You also have to figure out what justice is, what truth is, what faith is. You have to figure out how you're able to save your soul, if you have any, in a single lifetime, as well as pursuing your own desires, wanting to do this and wanting to do that. See, for 1,000 years of the Dark Ages, none of us in this class were burdened in such a way. You are born for a reason. And once you die, you will stand before God. It's very simple. The white man is not evil. The black man is not evil. If you want to know why there is injustice, it's God. God creates everything. His hands are involved in everything you see down here. It's not capitalism. It's not communism. And if you want answers, you don't seek therapy. You don't read books. You take your issues directly to the church and to God. Simple. So remember, first, it's the bubonic plague that kills a whole host of people. And you want answers, but there are no answers. Then someone tells you, no one knows why you're here. No one knows why this is the way it is. No one knows where things are going. You just got to figure things out. The problem with Galileo is that Galileo can find paradise in his findings. He's a scientist. He's inspired by the things he finds. I'm not a scientist. I just want to believe in something. I just want to make sure that my life is going somewhere. Galileo destroys that for me. I don't read books because I enjoy reading. I read books because I want answers. And I want answers because I don't know. And I don't know, which makes me confused, fearful. But that wasn't the end of the story, because a few years later comes this man named Martin Luther. Up to this point, the Catholic Church had a tremendous amount of power. It had its hands in every aspect of human life. Martin Luther was this young kid, and his father wanted him to be a lawyer. It's a good business. But one day as he's walking home from school, the weather was a little rough, thunderstorm here and there, and the ancient people believed that if you see lightning, the gods are really, really upset. So Martin Luther sits and prays. He doesn't want to die. And he says, if my life is saved, if my life is spared, I will be a monk. Now, one of the things you need to understand about the Dark Ages is that when people make a promise, they keep it. Death do us part, it's a serious thing. It's not like today. His life, unfortunately for the Catholic Church, was spared. He goes home, tells the story to his father. He says, Dad, I promise God that if my life is spared, I will become a monk. I'm not going to be a lawyer. And his father is pissed. He's upset. He says, I can't go back on my promise. And he becomes a monk. Now, one of the things about the Catholic Church at this time is the following. They want to build churches. They want to expand. If you have a one-bedroom or you want to move into a two-bedroom, you need money. If you want to buy a house, you need money. If you want to expand somewhere and buy a few cars, you need money. And money just doesn't fall from the sky. So what does the Catholic Church do? You give me some cash, and we will speak to God about your soul. We'll tell God that so-and-so has given $1 million. So instead of sending that person directly to hell, why not just cook him a little bit in purgatory? And after 5 years, you can send him to paradise. Martin Luther, this young kid who's now a monk, very passionate, has a very intense relationship with God, or with religion, or faith, says this is the wrong thing for the Catholic Church to do. And he doesn't want to fight the church. He just wants to correct some of their mistakes. But the Catholic Church picks a fight with him. And something really strange happens after a few weeks. A good amount of people begin to follow Martin Luther. For those of you who like revolutions, uprising, mass movements, you just need a spark. There's a good amount of anger inside people, anywhere, any age. All you need is someone who can open certain parts of you, grab that anger and bring it out. And then protect it with language, with ideas, with philosophy. And you will follow them. And so for the first time in Catholicism, something interesting happens. You have this huge, powerful opposition. Let's say we don't like the way Catholic Church is doing business. And now you have the rise of a brand new Christian tradition. We protest against the Catholic Church. Are you a Protestant? Are you a Catholic? First there is a bubonic plague. Then there is Galileo telling you that you're going nowhere. And then there is Martin Luther who says the Catholic Church is wrong. So we have to recreate the image of Jesus Christ. Reinterpret the Bible. If this is a little difficult to grasp, let me give it to you this way. You're born, your mom and your dad hold you, love you, kiss you, hug you. A week later, you run to them and they slap you. And you have no idea what the hell is going on. You were just hugged a couple days ago, now you're slapped. So it begins the conflict. But you're too young to kind of figure all this out. And adults are very, very complicated. A week later, you want to run to your dad, but you're a little doubtful. But you run nevertheless. You allow your innocence to take over, you run to your father and he holds you. So, oh, okay, maybe I was mistaken. Following day, you run to him again. This time he kicks you. And you have no idea if your father is going to hug you and kiss you or punch you and slap you. And little by little, you lose your ability to have faith in your parents. You lose your ability to trust, to love. And that's going to live inside your soul. You will never, ever, ever be able to trust anyone again. Because in your software, there is this program. Human beings are dangerous. Do not trust anyone. Everyone, close or far from you, to you, has the power to betray you. Some years pass away, and you have all these different people from various corners of the Western world. They say it's no longer enough for us to have faith in God. We need to rationalize this. Remove emotions from religion. Look at it intellectually. But none of us in this class have the capacity to intellectualize religion. We want to have faith. We want to believe. We want to trust. I'm not Immanuel Kant. I'm not a Schopenhauer. I'm just a regular chap, confused about who I am and where my life is going. I want someone to tell me what to believe in. That's what I want. Don't ask me what love is. Just tell me you love me. That's all I want. But people are now forced to figure things out, and it's too much. And at this point, something really interesting happens. All of us live in small villages and towns, 200, 300 people, maybe 1,000. For those of you in this class who watched the movie White Men Can't Jump, there is a scene where this black guy wants to make a bet with this white guy, but he doesn't have any money. So he puts his mask on, goes to this shop, pulls out his gun, and says, "Give me all the money you have." And the owner says, "Johnny, is that you?" I said, "God damn it, yeah, it's me. But let me buy that gun from you for $10. Here's the money." When you live in small villages, small towns, everybody knows everybody. Your name is valuable. You have a reputation to protect. More importantly, you have a last name. Your last name does not belong to you, it belongs to your father. You don't want to destroy the image of your father in your town. And if you live in this village, it means your father lived in this village, and your grandfather and great-grandfather. It means you're going to get married to someone from that village. They're not going to be a Jew or a Hindu or a Muslim. They're going to be a Christian. They're going to think like you, believe like you. We don't have feminism just yet. Women have only one function. You get married, you have kids, you have a house, you're a housewife. End of story. You don't have to figure out who you are, what you are. We're not yet at a point where women no longer trust men, so they need to go to school. They need to have a job. They need to have their own money, because men suck. It's a very cohesive environment. But all of a sudden, you're no longer having cities of 200 people. You're having cities, 500,000 people like Oakland. You know what that means? It means you walk among strangers. Nobody cares for you. Nobody knows you. If you get sick, who cares? If you die, who cares? It also means you're going to walk away from your parents. Why? Because a village of 1,000 people has only one Safeway, has only one bar, has only one movie theater. But when you go to New York, there are millions of bars and millions of movie theaters. In your village, you only have 10 things that you desire. Only 10 things. When you go to New York, there are a million things you desire. And the more things you desire, the more confused you are, the more discontent you are, the more unhappy you are. But something amazing also happened. In your village, your salvation was God. In New York, your salvation are your desires. You can be happy in life. New York will give that to you. By this time, God doesn't really have very much power in human life. Doesn't occupy very much space in human psyche. Your life belongs to you, not God. In your village, you work for your father or for your uncle. They care for you. They love you. In New York, you're a stranger walking amongst strangers. And this is where Karl Marx comes in. There was a time where human life had meaning. You would come to class because you sought wisdom. You wanted to better your life. Not life what lives inside your pocket. I'm not talking about money. You wanted to enrich your intellect. You want to take care of your soul and your spirit. By the time Karl Marx comes into play, he comes to realize those things are long gone. Culture and society has only really one function. Remember the saying in the New Testament, what benefit is there for man to gain the whole world but lose his own soul? The truth is, by the time Karl Marx comes in, there is no soul. Soul is gone. Your life, your physical life, is insecure. From the moment you wake up, you need to work up to the time. It's midnight, 1 in the morning. And for what? Pennies. Factories come about, but they make sure that you're always poor. As long as you're poor, you will not be autonomous. You will not be an individual. You will not be free to do as you please. They will earn you. If you've seen the movie The First Matrix, there's a scene where Morpheus looks at Neo, Thomas Anderson, and says, human beings are reduced to a Duracell battery. And once the energy has been sucked out of you, you'll be trashed. You're no longer useful to anyone, including yourself. Marx looks at the human beings and says, these are no longer human animals. These are no longer people with souls. These are what we call alienated selves. People who are strangers to themselves. Why the hell do you take this class? For what? A stupid A or a B or a C? You come to this class stupid and you leave stupid. All you have is an A or a B or a C. You waste 5 weeks of your life for a letter grade. And that's exactly what Marx was talking about. People work from the moment they wake up to the time to go to sleep, to pay rent, to pay food, to pay for gas. PG&E just keeps raising its fees. If you live by the zoo, they add an additional $400. If you live just below the zoo, they only add $200. And none of us have the power to do anything. Next time you go out with someone, remember this history lesson I'm giving you tonight. They don't have it all together. None of our dates have it together. None of our companions have it together. And what happens when you become a stranger to yourself? You have a great amount of anger inside you. And what do you do with it? Well, nothing. You can't do much with it because you'll get fired from your job. Natural self for Marx is you have a belly, it's hungry, and you eat. You're a human being, you have urges, you have sex. You have a physical body, it needs to be active, so you work. These are natural, organic things. But the moment you have big cities and factories that treat people like animals, you have sex, it's because you're lonely. You have love because you're miserable, because you're depressed, because you're irrelevant, insignificant. Because big cities rob you from your family. You don't get a chance to spend time with them, form relationships. There is no intimacy in big cities. Things move fast. And you don't work because it's an extension of your soul. Kind of like this class, you don't write essays because you're interested in the stuff. You got to write because you need to get a grade. You don't write because you want understanding, because you want to transfer. Then comes this fellow, quite awful. Sigmund Freud. A beautiful human being, with a great mind. He was devoted to understanding why human beings are the way they are. What is it about our psyches? Why are we so goddamn angry all the time? Why is there envy? Why is there jealousy? Why are we so violent? Why is it that we destroy everything that we create with a great amount of labor? Freud, of course, was no lightweight. 3 of his sisters were gassed during the Holocaust. When he was very, very young, he had a brother, Michael, I think. And you know, when you're the first child, your parents give you 100% of their attention. For those of you in this class who have siblings, and you happen to be the eldest, you may not know this, but your parents gave you everything they had for the first couple years. And then the second child came about. They still gave you attention, but now they were preoccupied with the sibling. And I don't know if you pay attention to, if you have children, 2 or 3 or 4, pay attention to their emotions, and you realize there's a good amount of jealousy and envy that takes place inside the psyche of a 2, 3-year-old kid. So Freud prayed for his brother's death because he wanted all of his parents' attention. And God listened, and his brother died. And Freud never forgave himself because he believed that he was the cause of his brother's death. You want to know who you are? Not possible. Human beings forever will remain a mystery to themselves. There's a part of us that none of us have access to. You wake up in a good mood, 10 minutes later, you're in a foul mood. You're walking, you're calm, you're cool, you're stoic. All of a sudden, you're enraged and you want to act out. If you have desires that come from nowhere, the only reason why some of you in this class don't get up and go home despite being tired is because you've been domesticated. The truth is, this thing they call id, this primitive, relatively instinctual part of you says, I don't really want to be here. I don't want to write this essay. I don't want to listen to this guy talk. I don't like his voice. I don't like the way he looks, he smells. I don't want to do anything with this guy. But your parents have taught you well. So what do you do with your boredom and frustration in this class? You push it down. You repress it. You suppress it. It's like you put a Band-Aid on a scar. Every human being for Freud is like a volcano ready to erupt. Every single one of us. And we're just waiting for a chance. For those in this class who are looking around Oakland and you see violence, you see cars going so fast on the highway, people without any mask just breaking into cars, broad daylight. This is what Freud was talking about. Remove domestication, remove parents from the lives of kids, and what you have are just raw human beings. And they will do whatever. They will have no fear, no shame. They're not inhibited by anything. This is no different than being in a relationship, you know. You and your companion have some disagreements, arguments, but you tend to be somewhat passive. You always look the other way. And once in a while you realize that he comes home or she comes home and he says, how you doing? And you just lash out and it comes from nowhere. The truth is, it's not that it hasn't come from anywhere. You've been repressing these emotions for the past like 5 or 6 days or weeks or months, and now it comes out. That's who you really are. Life is dark, life is bleak, life is difficult, life is filled with misery. So what do we do to cope? You don't smoke weed because it's fun. What else can you do? Life is boring. It's frustrating. How the hell do you cope with the difficulties of life? You gotta numb yourself somehow. You don't drink because alcohol tastes good. Because you want freedom from the burdens of life. You don't get married because you love. What the hell do you do with loneliness? And all of us, for Freud, have these ridiculous expectations. You want to have sex, but oh, it needs to be with a good amount of love. You need to be just and compassionate and fair. And just in case you're not, you punish yourself. We are nothing but a bundle of conflicting emotions and desires. And there is no way out of this. None of us are artists. We don't create things because we're creative. We create because we're expressing the difficulties of life. Thomas Kincaid, for those of you who have seen his paintings, always the sun is out, beautiful waters, beautiful trees, middle of the hill, some forest, and there is this tiny little cross. Any of you walk around Oakland, see those things? Of course not. What else can we do? We create paradise on canvas. Life has no magic in it, but we have no choice but to create magic. We call it Harry Potter. We don't know what sort of emotions live inside us, but we know they trouble us, bother us, so we create inside and out too. We don't create Rambo because it's fun, because there's a good amount of injustice. What the hell can we do about the injustice? Nothing. So we create a cultural release. That's what we call it in sociology. Let's create Rambo. A group of people being taken as hostage. One man goes in there and saves them all. None of us have love in our lives, but watch the movie English Patient. And for the next 10 minutes after the show, you'll hold your companion's hand and you'll have deep dish Zachary's pizza. And you'll write poetry, and you'll sing poetry. And then you have, of course, the 20th century. And after. There is nothing left for us to believe in. Are you a boy or a girl? Who the hell knows? Is your marriage going to survive? Who the hell knows? Everything's up in the air. Can't trust anything anymore. Depression, loneliness, anger are the hallmarks of the 21st century. None of us in this class are sane. It takes a tiny little spark for us to go nuts. And you're not religious the way Dark Age people were religious. You have faith because you have to believe in something out of desperation. Look at the culture. It's secular. It's meaty. It's all flesh. It's all about tables and chairs. When you go to Italy, for example, as we did some years ago, every mile you see a church. And simple people go in there. They sit, they pray, they have coffee. Not here, though. Do you have any questions before we continue? No one? Yeah.
I think I'm thinking something but even though I don't see any inherent meaning in life, I see that there can be like even if there isn't an inherent meaning to there being nice weather, I can still enjoy it and appreciate it. What perspective do you seem to have on people sign meaning? Like, you seem to think that there's no meaning, but do you think that it's meaningless to assign something?
Can I tell you a story?
Sure.
It's about meaning and about living in the moment, as you would say. And I'm going to borrow from my good friend Albert Camus, who's dead now. Camus wrote a novel which won him some prize. It's called The Stranger. It's about a man or some person who goes around just enjoying life. Just does things. Looks out the window, the sun is out, goes for a walk. Beautiful. He walks past by Barney's and it smells really good, goes in there and has a burger. Doesn't think much about money, doesn't think much about poor people across the street watching him have his burger. He's just enjoying life. He has a girlfriend. I think her name is Marie. And one day Marie asks him if he loves her. What is love? You want me to love you? I can love you. It's up to you. You tell me what to do, I'll do it. Because I live in the moment. Marie says to herself, well, what a useless sort of fellow, but he's my boyfriend. A few days later, Marie looks at him again and asks, you want to marry me? You want to marry? I'll marry you. It's up to you. 3 days later, he's walking somewhere. There is this neighbor that they have, Mary and Rousseau, and there is this leash around this dog's neck, really tightly, and the dog is choking. And Marie looks at Rousseau and says, call the cops. Why? Live in the moment. Why do you want to think about this stuff? Just see things and then pass them by. A few days later, he's on the beach somewhere and he kills an Arab. And then when he gets caught, he looks at the police and says, it wasn't really me. My finger is true. It was on this and it went like that and the gun went off and the Arab fell. It just happened. Everything for him just happened. And then there is this moment where things fall apart. He is forced to think. Why do you take this class? Why do you watch the movies that you do? Why do you have the friends that you do? The moment you're forced to reflect, you realize a good amount of things that you and I do on a daily basis just don't make any sense. They're stupid, childish, irrelevant. But we do it out of desperation. What else can we do? Reflection is something that we are not meant to do as human beings. Nobody gets married because they reflect. People get married because it's just something that people do. You don't have kids because you think about it. It's stupid. If you were to think about whether or not you should have kids, nobody would have kids. Every organism desires to continue its survival. Human beings need to survive. If you were to reflect as to whether or not it would benefit you to have children, human beings would have been gone a long time ago. There's a reason why we only like to have faith in people like Jesus or Moses or Muhammad or the Buddha. And we only believe in them because they're dead. If they were alive, they would demand things from us. And the things they demand go against life. How many people can be a Karl Marx, a Sigmund Freud, a Jesus Christ? Not very many, and there's a reason. These are people who go against life, against desires that you and I usually have. If this is a little difficult to grasp, go to a funeral one of these days. Whether it's friend or foe, doesn't really matter. And just sit there as the mother is wailing and screaming because her son passed. And you realize you're pushed into deep reflection and it's bothersome. Your life becomes empty all of a sudden. You don't know what to do with yourself. You want to go and talk to the mother and say, I'm really sorry, but you realize that language fails you. is cheap. It's hollow. You are cheap. You are hollow. It's best not to think about things. And one of the problems with all these ideas is that it forces people to think, and it's not a good thing. You should think about how to make money, how to cheat on your exam. You know, these are reactive thinkings because you need that, because you need to survive life. But the moment you begin to reflect, you walk away from life. You look at it from a distance. Say, okay, well, is this meaningful? And the answer is no. Any questions or comments anymore out there? Wolf?
Okay. I was just curious then, I guess, at what point did we start thinking?
So there's a thinking that's outward, and there is thinking that's inward. If you don't have next month's rent, okay, most of your brain space is occupied with how am I going to make some money to pay rent? You think, and it's good, because your flesh needs protecting. Your belly needs to be satisfied with food. Okay? You don't want to suffer heat. You don't want to suffer from the freeze out there. So you need to think to survive life. Let's say you have enough money now, and you've bought yourself a tiny little house. It's beautiful. And you go to Ross, you buy some furniture, you go to Trader Joe's, you get some flowers. You come home and you say, it's a nice place, but I don't know why I feel so lonely. And this particular way of thinking is not so much about tables and chairs of your house. It's about you. Now you introspect. Your thinking is no longer out there. You reflect and it goes inside. And the trouble with going into the world of reflection is it's dark. Okay? See, your task in this class is very simple. I give you an audio or a video, you look at it, and you write about it. Easy. But the moment you say, I really want to understand, you're walking into a territory you've never been into. What exactly is it that you want to understand? Let me give an example. There is this, and it goes back to the question some of you asked yesterday in this class. These ideas are for who? Okay. So there is this, I think, story in one of the Gospels, I'm not quite sure which, maybe Luke, maybe Mark, maybe John, maybe Jack. It's about this farmer with a bag of seeds. He doesn't know, he's walking around, the bag has a hole in it, and the seeds begin to fall here and there. Some fall on concrete, some fall on hard ground, some fall on good ground. Now, the thing is, the seeds that fall on concrete, they're not going to be taken into the earth and sprout. They're going to die. Okay? The seeds that fall on hard ground, well, they're going to die as well. The seeds that fall on good ground, well, they have the potential to become a gigantic tree, but there are vultures everywhere. They're going to come down, okay, break the skin open, take what's good, leave the shell and go away. Only a couple go in. Now, if I ask you, why don't you write an essay about this? I'm sure you will write 20 pages. If I was to ask you, so Wolf, are you the hard ground? Are you the concrete? Or are you the good ground with a good amount of vultures? Or are you the good ground that has no vultures in it? Which one are you? Now, if you happen to be dishonest in the sense that you don't like to self-examine, you say, oh, like many of my students, the pastors, I am the good ground. So really, you're an 18-year-old punk. You have no idea who you are, what you are. Your life is filled with all the stuff that you got to do. These are vultures. It is true that an idea can inspire you, but inspiration can slowly be snatched away, or quickly, by the troubles of life. If I was to ask you to write an essay expressing which of these categories you belong to, what are you going to do? Especially if you wanted to exercise a good amount of honesty. Not for me, just for you. Now remember, if you're 18, you can't be honest. You're filled with pride and arrogance, which is natural. If you happen to be 40, 45, you've been around the block a few times, you know that you make a lot of mistakes, you sit back and you say, well, you know, I can't really trust my own judgments about anything anymore. Now you have to introspect. And you realize, well, when you go inside to figure things out, it's a place you've never occupied. It's dark. It's frightening. And after a while, you just kind of get bored and exhausted. If that's a little difficult to grasp, and I don't suggest any of you in this class do this, go home if you have a companion. Look them in the eye and ask, do you love me? No doubt, to save the relationship, yes, I love you. Why? What exactly does it mean? And when you force people to think, they're not going to like you. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existential philosopher of the 20th century, did something really, really, really amazing. Imagine you go home and there's your companion and you ask them, so, do you love me? Yes. Well, tell me why you love me. Oh, you're intelligent, you're wise, you're insightful, you're creative, you're poetic, you're an artist. And they say all these wonderful things about you. And you melt like chocolate. You stretch out your arm, you grab theirs, and you take them to the bedroom. And both of you begin to undress. And now you're in the space where the two of you are going to be physically intimate, i.e. have sex. Now, your companion is on the top, in the bottom, and you realize that all of a sudden it becomes so vulturous in regards to your body, your thighs, your this, your that. And all of a sudden you kind of distance yourself. I mean, physically you're there and very much engaged, but intellectually, mentally, you kind of take a few steps back and say, 10 minutes ago, he loved my mind. Now he's just playing with my boobs. What the hell is that? And he acts like an animal. How is it that someone who confessed his love for me, for all these transcendental, non-sensory things about me, all of a sudden is only interested in my meat? And ultimately, that's what it is. Ultimately, love is reduced to trash. I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not a Hindu, I don't do Tantra, I don't know what the hell those things are. The point I'm trying to make is, reflection is something that human beings are not designed to do because it goes against the flow of life.
Why do we have that as a concept?
Because life, unfortunately, forces us to reflect. Your pocket is filled with money, you have a sandwich in your hand, you're about to eat it, a homeless person walks past by you, and you happen to be in a very strange mood. He looks at you, and he sees the burger in your hand, and all of a sudden, you feel embarrassed, but the embarrassment turns into shame, and shame turns into self-hatred. And self-hatred forces you to ask, what's the difference between me and him? Why is his life this way and mine this way? And then you put your hand in your pocket, you give him $10, only to realize he's drinking it away. And then you suffer more injustice. I gave this money to him to buy a burger, he's drinking it. And now you have a different set of emotions. That's what life does. I mean, one of the nice things about the American culture is it is so goddamn entertaining. The moment you want to reflect on anything that's worth reflecting on, the culture comes in and snatches it away. It's beautiful. See, third world countries don't have that luxury. Because everywhere you go, there is poverty. Yeah. Megan, Gulia, what is it? I'm so sorry. Nina. There was a movie, Point of No Return. Have you seen it? You should. It's so good. I mean, I saw it when I was like 10. Nina Simone. Anyways, go ahead.
But it was basically, you said something about self-hatred forces us to reflect on like our empathy, like the way you kind of drew the parallel between seeing somebody have a food and feeling shame for that, which then brings self-hatred. And that self-hatred is what kind of led to this theoretical person giving money to.
Okay.
And I'm just curious on why what you're saying that self-hatred is like drives.
It's not what it drives. It's a sort of self-hatred that makes you a bit more human. You see another human being as your own extension. So, sure. Yeah. There is another kind of self-hatred where your life has just fallen apart and you're depressed and you're just down and out. And every time you rise up to make your life work, it just doesn't work. And so you just end it. That's a negative kind of self-hatred. This other kind of self-hatred kind of makes you a bit more, as you say, humble, more human. And you're willing to kind of exercise, or it happens to us, compassion, empathy, all that. Yeah.
I'm curious to what you were saying about like being a shared how reflection is bad, or because I could be wrong, but I know that when a lot of humans or people in general just don't have good foresight, and it's hard to see outside of yourself and see what may be true to other people. But I do find that I self-reflect very often, and that while it used to be bothersome to me, it's now something I understand that I'm incredibly small and that there's so much I don't know, but I don't mind because I appreciate to just think to myself and know that I'm probably wrong, but there may be some right within it. And I think that I'm curious to why you think that all, like you kind of described it, but I'm curious to why, like, you think reflection is always 100% bad, because I can see that I've known people who have done great things out of reflection. And I think it's more about getting in your head.
I think the moment you begin to enjoy your craft, whether it's reflection, whether it's playing drums by yourself, reading a book by yourself, the moment you're able to enjoy your company, your own company, for the most part, you become very self-sufficient. Okay? For a good number of people, that's not the case. And usually you're pushed into reflection because life is difficult. And so, or some events take place that you don't really know what to do with it. Yeah. Can you tell me your names first and then forgive me? I only know Wolf's name because she's been in like 10 classes. Ida.
You talked about in life and kind of believe to it or being reduced to being so
Right.
So if that is the case, why are we meant to believe that religion is meaningful?
I think all of us need to believe in something to continue with our existence. For you, maybe it's your kids. You know, for example, if you didn't take this class, you'd have to stay home, maybe be around your kids, and the kids after a while frustrate you, and you sit back and you say, why did I have kids in the first place? This is ridiculous, right? And all of a sudden, the moment you begin to ask those questions, you kind of begin to examine your entire life, and you reduce it into nothing. Right? So you come to this class, and I entertain you for the next 2-3 hours. Religion functions the same way. It just, for the people 1,000 years ago, it had a different meaning. It had a different function. You know, people sat together and talked religious ideas. They talked political ideas. Everything revolved around religion, religious ideas. That's not the case today. We don't go to church because life is good. We don't have religious conversations. We don't have political conversations. Secular cultures don't have very much religion in it. America is a meaty secular culture. It has religion, it's just at the very footnotes. Small print that nobody ever reads. It's too much. And religion and capitalism, secularism, they don't mesh well. And you shouldn't be religious in America. If by religion you mean being compassionate, being generous, being reflective, having faith, trusting people, having an open door policy, it's a mistake. You should go to Home Depot and buy extra few doors because you don't trust people. And you don't trust people because you have faith in your own observation of how Oakland is or other places. To be sure, though, religion has a function in our physical life. It has a function in our emotional life. If you're depressed, if you have no belief in God and you don't like God, well, chances are you're going to be even more depressed. If, on the other hand, emotionally you're depressed, but you have a belief in God, you will take your sorry ass to a church. And you will sit and you pray. You know, let this cup pass by me. It's too much. Show me an opening somewhere. Intellectually, you read something, a gospel, for example, and all of a sudden, a certain verse stumps you. Well, I want to figure this out. And you pray. And maybe you're very evolved. Maybe your life is no longer physical. Maybe your life is no longer emotional. Maybe your life is no longer intellectual. You know, and you say, I want to figure out what my soul is, where my soul is, how I can retrieve it, if there is any way. And there are all these different stages. And all of a sudden, at different stages, religion has a different meaning. It has a different function. I mean, let me give you an example. When you're single, you go out there, and let's just say you're heterosexual. Okay? You go out there, there's a guy who happens to be cute. Well, what's the skill that this guy needs to have? He needs to be a good politician. He needs to be a good talker. He needs to shower before meeting you on a date. He needs to have enough money to buy your popcorn at the movies. Okay? These are the skills that he needs to have. And then the relationship becomes a bit more complicated. You guys are now intimate, not just physically, but emotionally. Well, he needs a different set of skills. He needs to be a good listener. Okay? He needs to take out the trash. He needs to wash dishes, maybe vacuum. When you're having your monthly cycles, he needs to just keep his mouth shut, maybe. And all of a sudden you realize, well, these are the skills you were not looking for at the beginning, but now you are. And then you're pregnant. Now, as a father, you need a different set of skills. You need to have a steady job, a job that gets medical benefits for the family. You need to be patient. You need to move around with the kids all the time. And all of a sudden you realize one man at different stages of life, okay, needs to have different functions, needs to have different set of tools. And oftentimes you go out on a date, you love him, but the truth is he sucks as an intimate partner. He sucks as a father. You have to be profoundly lucky to find a human being who kind of nourishes, satisfies all these different stages in relationships. It's tough. And religion is very much the same way. Yeah, yeah. Ida and Nina.
You mentioned at the very beginning was kind of how ritual religion in American culture. And I'm curious about what your definition of the religion used in our politics is. Politics surrounding bodily autonomy, what's taught in schools. Possible, and I feel like there's more speak about religion. Maybe it's not directly religious earlier, but it's still referenced as religion. There's some God on our currency or in our courts. That. So I'm just wondering kind of what definition of what do you think the definition of that is? Is it just a
When I was in India many, many years ago, we used to walk barefoot. And the place was called Missouri. It was kind of like San Luis Obispo. It was a tiny little city in the middle of the forest with snakes and monkeys and cows and donkeys and tigers and all that. As you walked, oftentimes poison ivy was around. They had a different name for it, I forget now. And the moment it touched your skin, your entire body would have rash. Right next to the plant, the poison ivy, was another plant. All you had to do was bend over, grab some, rub it on your skin, and it would go away. I think what you have is something that Pascal, the French philosopher, had argued, that Christianity has made it possible for us to sin without shame. And that means the following. Any of you in this class know Joel Osteen? Yeah, there is this, I think they're stationed in Texas. They have millions of followers. He's very cute. And he's one of those positive thinkers, which is good for the American culture. And he's one of those quick fixer pastors, kind of like IKEA. And recently, he's given the stage to his son, who happens to be like 23, 24. And you sit back and you say, how could a 23, 24-year-old kid, and then you look at the audience, right? Like 60, 70, 80, 90, someone has had cancer, someone has been through 5 world wars. How could this kid understand what any of those things really mean? But he's got a big mouth and there is no shame. So the point I'm trying to make is this. Pascal had argued that you create a culture where people say a good amount of trash and do a good amount of trash. But you keep the religion so on a Sunday they can go there and say, Father, forgive me for having sinned Monday through Saturday. I will try not to do it again. And so they go back out after the church and they drink and they smoke and they have sex and do all sorts of crazy things from Sunday, once they leave the church, until Saturday. Then they realize before they go to bed, oh, there is church tomorrow. I will repent. So what you have in America, secular culture, capitalism, it's really a vulturous environment to be, that you have a good amount of trash in this culture, but the way you cope with the trash is you also have religion, where you can kind of have the superficial faith about you, that things happen for a reason, that God will eventually take care of you and your society and your people, all that. You need that. And the truth is, it happens in every culture. Let me just share the story and forgive me, those of you who've heard the story before. Muhammad Ali and George Foreman had a fight in Zaire, 1978. Prediction was that Foreman is just going to kick his ass. Okay, Muhammad Ali, by then, he was a little too old. Foreman was young and ferocious. And the only thing Muhammad Ali was able to do, really, was just allow George Foreman to just beat him up for 8 rounds, waste all of his energy. About maybe a minute into the 8th round, or 2 minutes into the 8th round, Muhammad Ali Just knocked him out. He walks around Zaire, and there was just something really unique about Muhammad Ali. Still is, when you kind of just watch him talk and move around, when he trash talks his opponents. As people are cheering him on, especially kids, and Zaire is a very poor place, he looks around, looks at the kids, looks at, the space. He says, I don't really understand. You guys are so poor. You guys have nothing. And yet there is so much dignity that lives inside you. How is that possible? We have poverty in America, but there is no dignity in our poverty. How do you guys have so much dignity? And the thing is, you're talking about Africa, certain parts. Okay? And those parts have been around for thousands of years. Thousands of years. America is like an infant. Zaire is like a grandfather who's been around a lot, who's seen a lot. And so religion and life and politics are one and the same. The idea of let's keep religion over there and politics over there, most of the third world countries don't even know what that means. Because the truth is, look, you want sex. That's the politics of life. But you also want love. That's the beauty of life. And somehow these two forces have to come together harmoniously. America is just only hardcore sex. And whatever beauty there is in life, it robs it, steals it. Look at the number of people who suicide now. It's gone up 60%. Divorce rate is 60%. Depression is on the rise. Everything that's awful that's happening to human beings are moving up in charts. Why? If we had 100 people in this room, 70 of them will eventually get depressed, if not more. These are just facts. Now, some argue it's because of the amount of privilege that exists in this country. Some people argue it's alienation. Who the hell knows? But the point is, if you're wondering why third world people survive in some way so healthily, first there is community, there is support, and there is this harmonious marriage of religion and politics and society. It doesn't mean that there is no conflict. Anyone else? Yeah. William, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
First question, how do you see religion like affecting society? Right? You spoke of Joel's, right? So that prosperity preaching,
Right.
when you're the same person who that just built a mega church in Hurricane Katrina and didn't need all this
Right.
because we want the message for good, right? I think the society is more world where just like shaking our religion is interpreted differently. Like we treat like the Constitution, loosely or strictly, right? What kind of people used to like interpret our daily lives, right? And honestly, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, I see us like moving away, from just religious principles, right? It was an accountability system, right? There are consequences for your actions, sort of thing, right? So maybe like in the place of religion, if we don't have that, like what do you see us just going in general?
There is this wonderful story, I think, in the Gospel of Matthew, or maybe it's Luke, the prodigal son. We'll save, the details of the story for a different day, but briefly, what you have is a young kid, a young culture, someone who's walking into a territory but doesn't have very much experience. So the prodigal son means someone who has no experience and therefore wastes. And you can waste money, you can waste energy, you can waste your youth, you can waste your reputation, it doesn't really matter. But anything that's young and lacks experience has no choice but to make a lot of mistakes. America is young. It's going to make a lot of mistakes. Okay? It's like You're young and you think your marriage is going to be okay, but you make a lot of mistakes. Eventually, the wife leaves you and takes the kids. Okay? And you have to suffer loneliness and depression for a while. And then you kind of go back to the wife and ask forgiveness. And that particular error in your life kind of ages you, humbles you, and then you crawl back, and hopefully you'll be forgiven. The problem with America is that it's a superpower. It has a great amount of dominance, a great amount of power. You know, there is this story from the Sufi tradition. Sufism is a branch of Islam, and we'll talk about it never really in this class, but anyways. Look, instead of talking about that, let me give it to you in this particular analogy. If Peter makes a mistake, it's Peter. He's a student. Students are stupid. They don't know. If Jesus makes a mistake, the entire community falls. The problem with America being a superpower is that it has, and right now with technology, it's everywhere. You don't need to go to Saudi Arabia and create a revolution and demolish their government. Send Britney Spears. Send Taylor Swift. The job is done. So in the 21st century, America has so much power where it can kind of take the images that exist in its own space, okay, and impose it elsewhere. And it's something Krishnamurti, the Indian philosopher, talked about, that he was really worried about India and what especially America is doing to it. You know, we didn't have rap music in Iran, now we do. We didn't have rap music in Saudi Arabia, now we do. That's the force of America. You know, when you hollow a culture of its traditions, you have nothing to go back to. And it's something that happens to all of us, you know. But we'll talk about all this some more later on. What time is it? All right, let's do this for another like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes and then go home. Any other questions? No? You sure? Yeah.
So, you say America is like 8th period, I guess. How long do you think it'll be before America say?
I don't really know. I'll be dead by then, so, you know, that's my salvation. And the nice thing about, you know, being a little bit older is that I won't even get a chance to see how my kids will turn out. It'll be great. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, Abhi. Krishnamurti B.F. Skinner was a behaviorist. I lived in Davis. My aunt was going to UC Davis for a while. And Davis had this remarkable program. They would do strange things with fruits. They would like mix and match. They would inject like things in them. And all of a sudden you would have an orange that was like 10 pounds. And you would have the orange where it would taste like a pear. That's what. For those of you who may not know, Krishnamurti is an Indian fellow from India, not Indiana or America. Around 1875, a society was created, Theosophical Society. It was by a Russian woman, Helena P. Blavatsky, and an Indian and American man, Colonel Alcott. They had come to realize that society is moving in the wrong direction. We are entering what they call Kali Yoga. And Kali means like death and darkness and all that. That things are becoming really heavy. All the light that saves people, enlightens people, inspires people. It's like Tupac Shakur used to sing this way, but now he's replaced by Snoop Dogg. That light is being taken away and darkness is replacing it. It says we need to do something about humanity because that's not where we want humanity to go. And so they looked at some of the scriptures, Christianity, Judaism, not so much Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and they realized that every 2,000 years, all of a sudden comes a Messiah figure. If you look at the genealogy in the Gospel of, say, Mark and Matthew, they're very, very, very different. Right? But the point of genealogy is ultimately that you will have the Savior coming down to rescue the rest of us with these beautiful set of teachings. And so they went around the world to see if they can find the future Messiah. And it became like a competition between two people. Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was 11, and Christmas Humphreys, who was English, and I think he was in his 20s or early teens or something. Late teens. And eventually they chose Krishnamurti. They groomed him. It was like a social experiment. For example, which is quite scary, remarkable, fascinating, that it doesn't really matter who you are, what your temperament is like, what your soul is like. If I take you at a very young age and place you in a hut and pound your ears with classical music and only give you bread and water and cream cheese and only give you like the Gospels to read, there's a good chance that if I force you to read the Gospels every single day, you will have dreams about Jesus Christ. You will have dreams about St. Paul. You will have religious dreams. Not because God loves you, but because this is the only thing you've been exposed to. I mean, if you, for example, eat asparagus, go pee after you've eaten like a bucket of asparagus. Your pee will smell really weird. Not because God wants you to have that particular scent. It's just the things that you consume impacts what exits out of you. Okay? And so Krishnamurti had all these visions, all these experiences. And then there came a point where he became really, really, really honest. It's like you're in a marriage. There's nothing wrong about the marriage, but for some strange reason, you realize that its time is up. You just don't want to be in it anymore. But you can't just go to him or her and say, I'm out. Like a cow that you have like 4 or 5 stomachs. You kind of just say, all right, let me just sit on this for a while. Maybe I'm just mistaken. And after like 5 or 6 or 7 years, all of a sudden you summon up this courage. You walk to your companion and say, I'm done. Well, why? What did I do? Nothing. I just don't want to be around you. I want to be self-sufficient. This relationship has outlived its usefulness. And it takes time for this courage to come to the surface and express itself in a very practical, meaty way. And Krishnamurti at a certain point came to realize that, I don't want anything to do with the Theosophical Society. I don't know what truth is, he argued. Truth is this living organism. You can't put it in a book. You can't put it in language. You can't give it to people. Truth is living. It's a quacking organism. It comes to people when it wants to. It leaves when it wants to. You can't cage it. It doesn't belong to you. You can't claim ownership to it. If Christianity is about the Spirit of Christ, well, you can't just claim to be a Christian all the goddamn time. Spirit comes, Spirit goes, when it wills. You're a Christian from 10 to 10:15, you're fucked up the rest of the time. That's how it is. And that's what Krishnamurti argued. No one can claim ownership to truth. He says, look, I'm just going to go around, tell people there is no truth, there is no God, there is no religion. The only thing you can do is be honest. And the only way you can be honest is to think, to observe, to pay attention to things. Paying attention. The problem with paying attention is that you have to combat forgetfulness. It's the question we asked yesterday. Who wants an A? My hand goes up. Well, what the hell do you mean by an A, first of all? Do you know what it means to get an A? You may be inspired to get an A. Do you understand the requirements? Are you able to remember the requirements? It's too much work. And the problem with Krishnamurti, ultimately near the end of his life, nobody understands, he argued, and then he died. And the truth is, Krishnamurti sucked. He asked too much from people. He didn't understand life. He's kind of like a Jordan Peterson. He's like an Eckhart Tolle. All these ridiculous people go on the stage and tell the rest of us how to live our lives. Krishnamurti never worked a day in his life. He didn't have to pay rent. He was always on the stage. He had a tremendous amount of power. He didn't need to be in relationships. People just walked to him all the time. He had need for nothing, so he could tell the rest of us how to be. You know, he didn't understand capitalism well. He didn't understand the importance of money. He didn't understand the importance of cheesy love. I mean, he has this ridiculous, stupid book called The Dialogue with Oneself. And it's about examining the nature of love. And this is how it begins. Love is not attachment. Love is not jealousy. Love is not that. Are you serious? The only way who could be in love without being attached is Krishnamurti. I'm a married man with kids. I am fully invested. If another guy looks at my wife, I will be jealous. I will move towards anger and retribution. I will buy a gun and shoot the son of a bitch. I want to protect my relationship. That's who I am. I'm not the Buddha, I'm a regular chap who just read some ridiculous books. So Krishnamurti, like all these ridiculous YouTube teachers, go on the stage telling us to be something that's humanly impossible. It's stupid. I mean, one of the problems with the Gospels is that, you know, he looks at this like fisherman, Peter, come follow me. And Peter says, okay, are you kidding? He's got parents, he's got kids, he's got a wife. His parents are sick. What the hell do you do with that? You're not told any of those things. Peter doesn't tell us how difficult it is to walk away from parents, walk away from a wife, walking away from the kids. And then all of us are invited to be like Peter, which is stupid and insulting and offensive. But he's a nice guy. Krishnamurti. Anyone else? No one? Really? All right, let me tell you a couple of stories and then we'll go home. What time is it? We are here till what, 8:45?
8:50.
8:50? Jesus Christ. Any of you need to pee? Good job. Please do not be offended with the things I say. But if you are, always, please raise your hand and just say, you're kind of crossing lines and I'll come and give you a hug. American way. So let me just kind of create some maps on the board. Before doing that, though, let me tell you a story. You sure you have any questions? Alexis? You sure? Pepper? Okay. Yeah.
Not really a question, it's more like a comment.
Sure.
Everything just seems so dark,
Yeah, good job.
right? Both sides, whether it's frequency, right, or religion,
Yes.
So I guess you mentioned earlier about reflecting when I like to actually know how to reflect and comprehend that. And then there's also where religion is supposed to set some sort of structure of foundation and give you, I guess, the map of how to live, some meaning to life. But it's just, I don't know, it just both seem kind of so dark in a way where you're not really allowed to think for yourself, and if you do, you drive yourself crazy, right? So, I don't know, what is beyond that, right? So,
Can I tell you a story? It's not really related to your question, but I'll tell it to you nevertheless. In 2007 or 8, I think I left Laney for Folsom Lake College. I walked away from this place, went over there. It's a very interesting environment, Folsom Lake. Mostly Republicans. There is a church to its left, a church to its right, a church behind it. And Mormons have a heavy hand in the campus. And I wasn't this way. I used a lot of profanities some years ago. I was very loud, obnoxious. But as you age, you just mellow out a little. And I was forced to resign after maybe 2 months of being there. Because I was, to some extent, encouraging people to ask questions and examine and all that. And now when I think back, I realized that it was good that they forced me out. If you want to destroy your house, I hope you know how to fix it. If you want to bring a bulldozer and just get rid of everything, you better be a good carpenter. Because it's not enough for you to just destroy things that you don't like and then live in a place that has no walls or no roof. Socrates is great. Great in the sense that he inspires examination. But he doesn't give us any answers. It's me telling you, well, okay, you've complained so much about your wife, leave her. And you do. And say, okay, Amir, I left her. And now I'm sad and depressed and lonely. What do I do now? And I tell you, just stay in it. Stay in what? Sadness and depression and loneliness. For how long? As long as it takes. So, are you crazy? I would have rather just stayed in my miserable marriage because we had like 3 good days and 4 bad days. It was at least livable. So before you want to destroy anything, you better hope that there is a support system, that you have the craftiness to rebuild what you have destroyed. Destroying things is easy. The past 600 years or so, everything that was meaningful about human life has been destroyed. But it hasn't really been replaced by anything that's meaningful. Okay, so you destroy Mahatma Gandhi. Well, give me something that looks like it. You destroy music that pleases the human ears and the human heart. But you don't replace it with anything that's decent. If you have a support system, if you have parents who are religious, and people have phases they go through, You know, from the age 0 to about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, you like your parents, you love your parents. And then you kind of hit the rebellious age, where you say, my parents are jerks and nerds. And like the prodigal son, you say, you know what, you guys, see you around. You walk away. You live your life, you make your mistakes. And then you have these moments of insight where you say, you know, my parents were right. You know, I moved in with this person and they suck. And I suck. I should have stayed in school. I didn't. Because I was stupid. And then you kind of just crawl back to your parents. And these are phases you go through. I don't think there is anything for you to go back to right now. Society is far too powerful and strong. I mean, the influences, the power, the forces that live in American culture, way too much. Way too much. Edward Munch, and again, forgive me, those of you, was a Norwegian painter. He has, most of his paintings are really the same, but the one he has, The Scream, you have a guy, you know, who's just, his mouth is open, he's screaming, he's in pain. People see him, people hear him, but they're laughing. It doesn't matter who you are anymore, you're just going to be alone. And that's how it is. And it doesn't matter who you listen to, it doesn't matter what sort of workshop you go to, you know. The culture, the forces that live in it are just way, 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 way too strong. You're far too weak and incompetent to wrestle with them. There are really a good amount of books out there, you know, about drugs, about technology, that are both inspiring and frightening because they reveal to you how little power you really have to make any changes, create even a dent. And for those of you in this class who have some age on us, you know, we are on our way out. You guys, on the other hand, you're going to be here for another 60 years, hopefully. And that's tough. You won't make it. Okay. Any other questions before? No one? Okay. So now let's enter this fantasy land. And I call it fantasy because I'm going to start sharing some really some fascinating ideas with you. You just need to know that they're not applicable. They're not practical. They were not created for you and I. But they're just nice to hear, I suppose, once in a while. Even though we can't reach them. And we can never apply them. A couple months ago, I had an open heart surgery. 3 of my arteries were clogged, so they yanked open my chest. They took some arteries from various parts of my body. And then was glued back together. And I'm now forced to watch what I eat. I love ice cream and eclairs, but I can no longer reach them or touch them. I can only fantasize about them. And once in a while, I buy them for my kids, and I just watch them eat, and I envy them. And I also become angry for not being a bit more careful, exercising, perhaps watching my diet. I can't go back to being the callous person that I was. but I can fantasize about certain things. And so the ideas I'll share with you for the next 5 weeks, they're really fantastic. They're amazing, inspiring, exciting. But don't try them. Don't put them in your life. They won't work. So let me begin with the story of the salmon fish. Some fish lay her eggs under this rock and then dies. The force of the water pushes these eggs from under the rock, and slowly they move down. And by the time they reach this huge pool of water, this egg is now a huge fish. Walks around, gets married, buys a Tesla, goes to Laney College and grabs a couple of degrees, has children, lots of friends, loves her community. But something really awful happens to the salmon fish, and I don't know why. It's condemned. If there is a God, God condemned this particular fish to behave in such a strange way. Despite having a house, despite having a marriage, despite having children, despite everything in the salmon fish life being so wonderful, and the salmon fish being so happy, one morning the salmon fish wakes up and says, "What the hell am I doing here?" The salmon fish looks herself in the mirror and says, "I don't know who I am." Goes to the wife or the husband and says, "Who am I?" And the wife says, "You're my husband. You're Mr. Salmon." Says, "But I'm so confused. I'm so angry. I wake up and I feel nothing. I feel as if my life is meaningless. It's hollow. It's cheap. That this is not my home." And the wife says, "Maybe you should go on medication. Maybe you should call for a therapist. Maybe you should talk to your friends. Maybe you should go to church and pray to the gods." And the salmon does everything that the wife asks, but again goes back home feeling meaningless and irrelevant, insignificant, and cheap and hollow. I have made a house, but it's just not a home. I have a wife, but I feel so alone. I have children, but they mean nothing to me. And the salmon does something really strange. He says, I don't know what's happening to me, but I just need to leave. His parents come down and condemn him, punish him. His wife punishes him or her. All the friends come down and try to knock some sense into his thick skull, but nothing works. The salmon says, "This is not my home. I don't know where my home is. All I know is that this is not my home. This is not where I belong." So begins to swim. Destination unknown. A couple of things you need to know. The moment the salmon fish comes to realize that yes, he is married, but there is no relationship. Yes, he has children, but he feels isolated. Yes, he has a job and makes lots of money, but money no longer makes him happy. For the first time, he really understands what it means to be lonely. What it means to have no one in your life who understands you. You don't even understand you. Now, when you begin to ask questions this magnitude, your Messiah, your intellect comes down and says to you, read the book of Job, read Genesis, read Das Kapital, read Plato. And you do all those things. But none of those books, none of those ideas come down to nourish you. And you realize that nothing under the sun can help you, come out of this particular space. You feel abandoned by yourself, by your family, by the gods. You pack up and you go. This is the beginning of the salmon fish's spiritual quest. He doesn't go on this quest because he doesn't have a wife, because he's depressed. He goes on this quest because he has everything, and it's not enough. And that's where the word religion comes from. Going back home. That's what the word means. And it's not a physical home. It's a psychological home. It's a home you can't find in books. It's a home you can't find in people, in physical spaces. And that's why it's so difficult and it's so frightening. So in every spiritual quest, there is this desert life. A desert that Jesus goes to, Muhammad goes to, the Buddha goes to, Moses goes to, Gilgamesh goes to. You can't live amongst people. You can't do or continue to do what you have been doing for most of your life. It doesn't work. So the salmon fish goes against the current of the water, the river. Water is going this way, the salmon fish goes this way. Life goes this way, but you go against life. That's why reflection is not something that we do naturally. That's why divorce is difficult, because you're walking into a dark, unknown territory. We are not idiots. We are not foolish animals, you know. I know some of us in this class may want to break up our relationship, but we won't do it. Because at least you know the sort of evil you're dealing with. If you break up, you go to what exactly? You do what exactly? Which dating app do you use? So the salmon fish begins to use his or her instincts, intuition. My mind is useless. My experiences are useless. I'm going to close my eyes, shut my mind, and use an instrument I've never used before. I'm just going to trust. Life will take me somewhere. Remember, the salmon goes on this quest because he is rich. He has a house. He's got kids. He's got a job. He's got money. Religion for him is not an excuse. Faith for him is not an excuse. He's oppressed in a different way. He doesn't know, but he wants to know. He has a home, but feels homeless. Has a relationship, but feels alone. And when the salmon fish goes against the current of the river, in essence, he goes against the culture. The Buddha lived in a Hindu environment, went against Hinduism. Jesus lived amongst the Jews, went against Judaism. Muhammad lived amongst the Bedouins, went against the tradition. Understanding anything that's worth understanding demands that you go against the made ideas, belief systems, cultures, answers that exist already. That's why it's so difficult. Now, unfortunately for the salmon, this intuition of finding his proper home takes place at the worst time of the year. It's spring. And the bears are out. And they're hungry because they've been sleeping for a while. And of the 1,000 salmon fish that are flying upwards, going to a destination unknown to them, a few survive. The rest are eaten by the bears. I am sure Joel Osteen was inspired, but eventually money snatched him away. Fame and power snatched the spirit away from him. That's the bear. Those are the vultures of life. For those in this class who have seen the movie The Devil's Advocate, near the end, it's vanity that ultimately has us thinking too highly of ourselves. Those who survive end up at the very top of this lake, lay some eggs, and die. The job is done. How does that relate to human life? I don't know where I came from. Like the salmon egg, I floated down here. I was born in a certain culture. I was given certain parents. I lived in a certain society that has certain do's and don'ts. It gave me identity. It made me who I am. I went to school. I read some books, gave me degrees, power, relevant. I got married, kids. I am a collection of my experiences. That's who I am. I have not evolved or matured to be a salmon just yet. For me to really desire this different part of myself means that I have to come to a place where I look at my culture and say, I may have been born in Iran, but I'm not Persian. I may be married, but the relationship doesn't really satisfy me. I may have kids. I'm not really a father. I may have degrees. I feel so incompetent. I may have money. I feel so poor. And the truth is, I'm not there yet. When we look at all the figures that we'll talk about in this class, whether it's Gilgamesh, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Mahavira, what you need to know is the following. They are all rich in money, in power. They have everything. They're not like us. They don't care about the injustice of society. They don't care about relationships. They don't care about sex. They don't care about money. They have all of it. You need to get there before you can start your spiritual quest. They destroy gods to find a God that works for them. They don't rely on tradition. They don't rely on the existing culture and rituals. It's a path that they walk alone. Now, that doesn't mean that you should go home and burn your Bibles. You live your life the way that fits you. We're just talking about the salmons of humanity. They are what Sigmund Freud would call the super egos of human beings. They make us feel bad for the sort of lives that we have. I want to be like Jesus Christ. The truth is I try, but I can't. I fail. And it makes me angry. I want to be like Malcolm X. He's too much for me. And what you realize, there is a desire to be like Malcolm, but there is the incompetence. I'm stuck in between. I'm inspired, but I can't reach the fruit. So somewhere deep down, I'm always in agony. When we come back on Monday, since tomorrow is a holiday, I'll put some stuff on the board, sort of things that I suppose some of us have to go through to get to where we want to go. Again, remember, if I say anything that rubs you the wrong way, just raise your hand and say, clarification, please. Time? Okay, any questions or comments before we go? You sure? Andrew?
Ulcer complex.
The what? The what?
Ulcer syndrome.
What is that?
When you have a moment of not seeing the world as a commodity, or treating yourself as such, that you have these fleeting moments of feeling like time.
Like a phony? You know who Eckhart Tolle is, right? You guys know who he is? Eckhart Toilet? Okay, okay. Do you know who else? Do you know who Jordan Peterson is? Do you know who Malcolm X is?
Yes.
Thank God. It's not that Malcolm X was not a phony, because he was. But let me tell you what saved him. When he fell in love with Elijah Muhammad while in prison, he thought about Elijah Muhammad all the time, and he read the Quran all the time, and he worked with the Muslim Brotherhood all the time. When he was freed from prison, he actually went and saw Elijah Muhammad, and then he became a spokesperson for Elijah Muhammad, and then he was on the stage for Elijah Muhammad all the time. He was relentless. He was on the stage 24/7. Was he a husband? Absolutely. Was he a father? Yes. How often was he around them? Not very often. He was devoted to his job, which was enlightening not only the black people, but also later on, as he became a bit more evolved, he said, anyone can walk into my door. Anyone can sit at my table. The white, the brown, the black, the blue, doesn't matter. The more you're on the stage, doing what you're really good at, the less phony you're going to feel. When you walk away and you entertain yourselves with whatever this culture gives you, then at a certain point you say, well, you know, I was reading the Gospels the entire day, and now I'm dancing and drinking and smoking with my friends who are for the most part losers, and now you feel like a loser. When you find yourself in the wrong space, physically speaking, okay, if, for example, you say, I want to go home tonight and just read some good books because you're inspired. Now, when you're inspired, it's like there's this rebirth that's taking place inside you. You go home energized. The moment you open the door and you sit on the sofa, inspiration takes a lot of energy inside you. Okay? The more capacity you have, the more you can keep. But eventually, everything is taxing. The moment you sit on the sofa, you say, man, I'm so exhausted. I don't have the capacity to read a good book right now. Maybe I can watch a movie. And so you sit and you laugh because you're watching Seinfeld. And then after 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 50 minutes, you turn off the TV and you say, man, I came home promising myself to read a book. And I just laughed it away. It's so stupid. And then you feel like a phony. And what you'll do is you'll say, you know what? I'm just going to drop the class because I'm not really qualified to take that class. And that moment of inspiration, it didn't really happen. It was a figment of my imagination. And the truth is, all of us in this class, we kind of walk in two worlds. Moment of inspiration and just life the way it is. If you have moments of inspiration, if let's just say you're a great musician, the more you're on the stage and the more you're with your band and just practicing, the less of a phony you're going to feel. anything that cuts you from your passion will eventually impose certain emotions about you that will generate self-hatred eventually. Shame. For those of you who want to kind of get a taste of this a bit more, there is a great set of writings by the Christian Desert Fathers. That's what it's called, the sayings of the Christian Desert Fathers. And what is interesting is the guy is sitting in his tent. He hasn't seen anyone for years. All of a sudden he says, man, I feel so alone, I want to have sex with someone. He doesn't know what to do with this particular passion. He takes it to, one of the monks who lives like 10 minutes away. What should I do? And he's given a set of exercises. The point I'm trying to make is, at the moment an opposing passion comes about, you either give into it or you find a place that supports your original passion. I want to read a book. All that stuff is very complicated. If you don't have power, there's a good chance you're going to lose whatever inspiration lives inside you. Power, power, power. It's important. I know you love your kids. If you live in a bad neighborhood, you don't have very much power to get out, they're eventually going to be infested with drugs and alcohol and porn, violence. That's the way it is. Love by itself is not enough. Inspiration is not enough. You need physical power to protect the things you like. It's good to see all of you. See you next week. Stay in touch. I was joking about emails and all that. So.
I'm sorry, I arrived.
I'm sorry? It's okay. It's okay. You're fine. Thank you. Thank you.